Okay, so we've talked about getting logged in, setting up your profile, and now we're going to talk about creating assets. So I'm focusing on the article asset today. Most of the assets follow these rules and are similar. Um, so we can go ahead and take a look at what we want here. So when you first log into Blocks, you get this page. Your menu will be less intense than mine. We'll have fewer choices. But you go to Assets, and you're always going to start from this new asset. Note that these are all the assets ever published since we've been in the system and even before, but it includes articles, images, photo galleries, PDFs, audio. All of those are different types of assets, so any of those can be created from here. We're going to focus on the article. So if you remember from my last video, then we set up as the default asset author. And so you see that put me in my author profile and it put my byline in that I have defined. So you want to do that. This is the web headline is always required, and you have to fill that in before you save. Make sure that you are always using something that is appropriate. Even if it's not the final headline, don't put cuss words or something that you would not want to have published in that headline. Always make sure you're putting in something that's appropriate, fits the story, even if it gets changed down the line. Body copy is where you are writing your story. Ideally, you would be writing your stories directly in Blocks, but we understand that sometimes you don't have an internet connection or you're collaborating with someone and Google Docs or Microsoft Word makes more sense for you. If that is the case, please, 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 please paste as plain text. So click this clipboard and paste whatever you want to paste in from here. So that just clears out any weird formatting. I can immediately tell in the HTML if we've pasted in from somewhere else without using that tool. It really messes up print for the Missourian. So always use that, even when you are copying like a statement from a press release or an email or something, go ahead and use that paste as plain text tool. You may not be able to see it directly in here, but I promise it will be visible later down the line. Other tools here, so you will always want to put in your name and phone number, which I'm doing the classic TV version of my phone number. And you'll put that in an inline note. So an inline note does not publish, but it allows editors to see things here. You want to be careful about spacing. We use this as well for CQs and ACs. So you just want to be careful about your spacing. So if this is AC, CQ, be ACing the quote, CQing the name. You would mark those, put a note, and just be really careful. It's going to try to expand that. So you'll want to kind of be careful about how your spacing works out with that. So you use inline notes for that as well. You can use the link planned in 2019, but was so you can go back and hyperlinked. So maybe it's you're linking to the Parks and Rec, you hit that, you fill in. Or maybe you're linking to an old story when they initially talked about this. You can actually hit the arrow and link to an asset and actually find a story directly here if you don't want to dig it out from the website. You can use the formatting options for bullets, numbers. You're not going to, this is special characters. If you're using fractions or something, that's helpful. One other piece here, you can expand the editor so you can just focus on what you're writing in your story. The biggest trick here is that you don't use the back button. You always want to just resize it from that button in both places. You might want to include a subhead We use heading 3 bolded for subheads. So if you are looking at this format, heading 3 and bold, that will make your subhead correct. So that's a formatting option, especially in a longer story. You can also embed tweets. So in the last video I showed you, you want to connect your Twitter account. And then once you've done that, you'll be able to either search for a tweet that you want to include, or you can put the URL directly in. So once I do that, it's here. I can move it around. It's what we would call embedded. It'll show out the full tweet in the Twitter format. So those are the menu options there. You'll see down here, I have these options that are showing my word count, my character count, how long it is for print. You'll want to turn those settings on. It's under the setting button. It is show stats, so I can see those. The next tab over is the summary. This on the homepage is what you see under the headline. So this is another way to draw someone into your story. It can be no longer than 125 characters. So knowing your character count matters. So keeping an eye on that to be less than 125. Your summary should not be the same as the headline. You guys, again, if you're putting in placeholder, make sure that it is still accurate and does not have something in it that you would not want published. You don't need to worry about the tagline. Teaser and cover art are generally for photo. Start date time, note that the story is going to start based on when you created the article. So if you were writing, pre-writing the city council story on Monday morning, then if that time doesn't get updated and you publish, you're done with the story actually at 11 p.m., but you started it at 8 a.m., it would have that 8 a.m. date. So you want to make sure you update that. Please do that before you send to your editor. Display priority is managed mostly by the iStats, but we like to have something filled in there. Generally, a local story would have a 1 to 4 priority, and a wire story would have between 6 and 10. So you can fill those in. We'll give that a 3. And then over in these tabs, the slug, this will come from your editor. Our format is in for news. The full date, what is today? It's the 15th. With the year, and then whatever the slug word is that is given to you by your editor. So we always try to match these up exactly because they need to match the budget for print purposes. If it's sports, it gets an S. If it's opinion, it gets an O. So that's kind of how we designate our sections there. Otherwise, you don't have to mess with this. Under tags, every story needs a section for it to show up in the right place. If you go under news, you want to be as specific as you can. It can have more than one section, but it's recommended that the first section is the most relevant one. So if I mark K-12 and local, but let's say it's more of a local story than a K-12, I can drag and drop those. It does not need just an overall news tag. I'd rather have the more specific sections. And then the same, there's sports sections as well. Keywords might autofill. You don't really have to worry about those unless you've been given specific instructions. Flags are generally handled by an editor or iStask. Related, a child asset is something that belongs with the story. This type of asset would not stand alone. So generally this is things like photos, maybe a PDF document that goes with your story, maybe it could be a video, it could be audio, it could be an HTML, a table. Any of these things can go in. And so they could be built straight from here, or you can find, this is where we use our slug tool to find the matching child assets. Sibling assets are related articles. So if you were working on this story and it's about the new park, you might go find stories where we've written about it before and you could add those. Sibling assets do stand on their own, but are relevant to the story they're attached to. Parent assets, the article is generally the parent asset, so you generally see a parent asset on an image, but not so much on a story. You don't have to worry about links or comments. Under content, this is where we add things like if you go boxes or bio boxes. There's different styles and formats, but generally for just a kind of sidebar piece for your story, you would use the bio box and just rename that to match what you want it to be about. So if that was an if you go box, maybe it's the groundbreaking of the new park or something, the bio box would be the style. We do use correction for corrections. There's a specific style for that. And then there is also an update. If we update a story, then there's a specific style we follow to tell people how we have updated that. Under other, you're generally not going to mess with too much here, but if you look under workflow, this is where we defined our workflow, and this is where it moves between workflows. Generally, you are not going to mess with that. The editors will move that along to the ICE desk in appropriate places, but that's where you find that. Reporters are limited in what access level they have, so you may not be able to manipulate anything because it's in a certain workflow. Under revisions, you can see past saves, so you can go back to see where something was changed or corrected. And so those are all get listed here. Only a certain number last in there, so the sooner you want to check that out, the better. But once you have saved, you can save frequently. There'll be another message or a video on autosave, but you want to save as frequently as possible. And you always want to save and close. I'll go over that more on the next video. But save and close when you're done with the story. Don't just close your tab. It will mess things up and lock you in the story. You can preview the story. If you click view, it will show you what it looks like. So you can see there's my embedded tweet, and you get a sense of whether things are looking the way you expect. So you can preview all of that. And those are the basics of an article. And like I said, most other assets work similarly, and you can work through those. There's also instructions in the guide to blocks.